Could have been the food, for example, like a thunderbird. So there's no proof because you have no person left. He disappeared. I mean, we can't just have these negative thoughts because if you haven't seen it, it doesn't exist. There's so many things every day that is washing up on the shores that scientists are shocked and they say, well, gee, that shouldn't exist. That should have been long extinct 40 million years ago.
Well, most people are under the illusion that science, as we currently understand it, has a really good grip on what this reality is, and they don't. People believe humans are the pinnacle of intelligence in the universe, and we're actually, in my opinion, just an entry-level intelligence. I mean, we're just barely able, intelligence-wise, to understand that there's a lot going on out there and be curious about it. But Dr. Vallée wrote a good book, UFOs, A Challenge to Science, and he went into this, that the UFO subject is not being handled with the same criteria that you would handle any other subject, and it's being handled very unscientifically because even when people hear the term UFO, there's an emotional reaction, pro or con, right away, and the ones that have a negative reaction to it don't want anything to do with it because they fear being too credulous. You know, they fear being gullible and being sucked into believing something that isn't true. But if you approach it from a scientific aspect, and like you said before, there's so many credible pilots and astronauts, just about all the astronauts have had UAP encounters in space. And Gordon Cooper in 1954, he saw a formation of flying discs. He actually filmed the flying saucer landing. But when some of my friends who consider themselves hardcore scientists hear somebody like astronaut Gordon Cooper state these things, they'll come back with, well, you know, he's not any more of a good observer than anybody else. He still has the same glitches in the human brain that we all suffer from. I mean, there's a rationalization. They're very heavily invested that there just ain't no such thing. So they've closed their mind off to it. But if you approach the subject with an open mind, at some point in time, you will have an aha moment that, oh my God, this phenomenon is real. And at that point, it changes your whole view of reality.
Oh, it does. But I will say this. When I first started broadcasting back in the mid-'70s, you know, when we talked about UFOs, you know, if you even mention UFOs to a group of people, a lot of people would give you that strange look like, you know, something's wrong with that guy. And they would kind of like step back from you a little bit, you know, like they're looking at you like you're crazy. Now, I mean, people are accepting it a lot better than they ever have. And, you know, anything to do with the paranormal has. And in going on to, you know, multi-universes, people are starting to accept that even, which if you would have tried to bring that up 10 years, 15 years ago, again, people would look at you like, you got a mental problem.
Yeah, talking about other dimensions and parallel universes used to be the domain of charlatans. You know, they viewed it as if anybody talks about another dimension, oh yeah, that's invisible, sure, you know. But the theoretical physicists, especially people like Italian physicist, he's a loop quantum gravity theorist, Carlo Rovelli. He's written really two good works, The Order of Time and Reality is Not What It Seems. And those two books really took a crowbar to my brain, and it hit me that our perceptual apparatus is very limited, and we only see in a certain limited band, and we only think in a certain realm. And there are intelligences that exist in different frequency bands of realities that we don't understand very well. And apparently some of them can shift themselves to where they appear to individuals or groups of their choosing. And that's happening around the planet every day.
It is. Now, you wrote this book. How's it doing? I mean, is it available on Amazon and all that stuff?
Yeah, it's on Amazon.com in Kindle version, Overlords of the Singularity. You just search for that. And then it's in a Kindle version with whisper sync technology. It'll actually read the book to you in the mechanical voice. And I've gotten used to that mechanical Kindle voice where I can comprehend it pretty good. But that's the first thing I did when I decided to publish is do it through the Kindle version. And it was so cool to download it into my Kindle and just let the mechanical voice read my own book to me. And I actually caught some spelling errors that I went back and corrected. But then it eventually was available in print and in Kindle. I've had some international sales. I've befriended people on Facebook from Germany and just different countries that are interested in my work. I had one doctor post on my Facebook page, "Your book is spot on." So in general, I'm getting really good feedback. If you look at the customer reviews, I haven't deleted any of them, just because I didn't like them or whatever. They're all very positive.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about the book without, causing
Sure.
it where it won't sell? But why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about it?
Okay. Well, the book is the byproduct of a few years of personal notes. Once it was revealed to me that we live in a multidimensional existence through this near-death experience that I had, I became interested in everything regarding the paranormal because I didn't think what happened to me was possible. Prior to it happening to me, I would write NDDs off as ketamine or, your brain's shooting endorphins in your brain to comfort you with the idea of non-existence. But I got into the subject. At first, I explored ghosts, and I actually spent the night in a haunted house, and I watched all the people come with their EVP equipment and their full-spectrum cameras and all that. And eventually, I ran into Dr. Kenneth Ring's work, which equated near-death experiences to alien abductions, which I thought was kind of weird. But then I realized that what we're talking about is one giant meta-phenomenon where ghosts, cryptids, Sasquatch, UFOs, and all this stuff that people are seeing is all tied into a giant meta-phenomenon. And I just eventually had this big volume of personal notes that I thought would be really useful and save people a lot of time. I've got the classic cases in there by decade, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and then all the various theories from the extraterrestrial hypothesis to the interdimensional hypothesis, the intelligent geophysical hypothesis. Everything you can think of is in there. So if you have a mild interest in UFOs and you just want to read one book, mine would be pretty good because it includes a little bit of everything to where you get a giant overview of the entire UFO phenomena and the latest speculations as to what it's all about.
So what do you think was going on realistically with UFO sightings and reports of abductions, reports of cattle mutilations, along with humans being mutilated? What is your feeling?
Okay, the cattle mutilations, which started around, it's not a new phenomenon. There's cases that are 100 to 200 years old, but it really started into the public awareness with this horse named Lucky or Snippy in 1965. And then it became gradually an epidemic and lasted into the late 70s. So the people that say it's natural predators are wrong from the get-go because it happened in a specific time period. It had a start, a beginning, an escalation, an epidemic level, and it just sort of died off. And it happened coincidental to all the televised reports. People were being interviewed on TV about alien abductions and the whole scenario where they're on the table and all that. And there are scientists and great thinkers like Dr. David Jacobs who believe since those happened simultaneously, they must have something to do with one another. So there's the whole idea that at least one, maybe multiple groups of extraterrestrials are interested for their own reasons into manipulating human genetics or manipulating terraforming life, possibly for transport to other planets that have maybe a slightly different environment, maybe to modify the atmosphere intake and things like that. So the truth of the matter, I believe, is buried in all of the world's religions. In the world's religions, with the whole angel-demon phenomena, I do think that there are higher realms of both positive and negative qualities, and the negative beings in, say, the fourth or fifth or sixth densities are interested in conquest and dominion and dominating and seizing planets for their resources or whatever they do with the planet. That's what they do. And then there's benevolent groups like the W56 group that interacted with over 200 Italians from 1956 to 1967. And one engineer, Stephen Brescia, has written a couple of books, Mass Contacts and 50 Years of Anesthesia. So there apparently are both groups present, and they have different interests. William Bromley is another researcher that wrote The Gods of Eden and determined that there was two ET factions. One he called the custodial group that pretty much loathes humanity. They don't care much for us at all. And then there's another one called the Maverick Group that has our spiritual evolution and our technological progress in mind and are here to help us. So we've got ET interventions of both the very positive, benevolent nature. Preston Dennett just wrote a book about UFO healings. And a friend of mine, Ray Hernando, that started the Free organization with Edgar Mitchell, late astronaut Edgar Mitchell, talks about his encounter with non-human intelligence, and it's very angelic, light being, healed their Jack Russell Terrier. And so you have the positive accounts and then the negative accounts. But one observation I have is the people who have a negative experience think the entire phenomena is negative, and the people who have a positive experience think that it's all angelic and benevolent, when the reality of the situation is both are here interacting with our psyche, and it's almost like we're here to choose which path we want to follow.
You put it better than most people do, because, you have to look at this. Like I said, I've interviewed a lot of people that claim they've been abducted, like Calvin Parker, just a whole bunch of people down the line. And the stories I get from them, at least they thought their abduction was evil, not, here to save mankind. It was more that they're out for their own selves. I've seen pictures of people that have been mutilated. Now, I don't know if they were mutilated by other humans, but, these pictures show that it was done the same way the cattle were done, with precision equipment that we don't even have, especially in the jungles. That part is scary. So I think there is all these different groups. The problem I see is everybody thinks that these people look like the Greys, or they look like this, or they look like that. The thing is, I don't think they even comprehend what they actually look like, because I don't think we could. Because unless you actually saw one, you wouldn't know. I mean, I hate to say it, movies and TV have influenced the whole subject for so many years. People think they look like little Greys, or they look like, like lizards, or they look like this. We just honestly don't even know what they look like.
Well, yes and no. There's 6 status reports put out by Leonard Stringfield, who's pretty much the sleuth of UFO crash retrievals with alien bodies, and he encountered several physicians that claimed they have actually autopsied a couple of little gray beings, and the general feeling is that there's some sort of biological robot, that they're actually drones produced for a specific task. And then you have Linda Moulton Howe that say that some of the Greys are biological robots, and they're produced by this other group from Zeta Reticuli named the Ebens. And the bottom line is there's a lot of ideas out there and a lot of ufologists with various paradigms and thought processes on this, but we really don't know the scope of what's going on. We only get bits and pieces. For example, we have the Antonio Villas Boas incident in 1957, I believe, where flesh and blood aliens took him aboard on a craft. He had sex with a flesh and blood alien, and it seemed to be for some breeding operation. And a lot of people wrote that off as kind of laughable fiction until it happened in 1992 to another guy from Australia named Peter Curry, and he actually had a hair left over from the encounter. And another researcher, Bill Chalker, put it through complete DNA analysis and found that the hair that was left from Peter Curry's sexual encounter was a combination of Chinese Mongoloid and Laplander. Now, the strange thing about that is there is no combination of Chinese Mongoloid and Laplander in Australia as a general population. And one of my favorite UFO authors, John A. Keel, kept pictures of various ethnicities because he investigated MIB sightings, Men in Black. And he said all the people would always point to the Laplander as what the MIB looked like. And I thought that was a strange connection, that we'd actually do DNA on an alien hair, and it turned out to be Chinese Mongoloid and Laplander. And then John Keel says that all of his MIB encounters that he interviewed personally pointed to the Laplander on his little chart of ethnic pictures as to who they were. So there's some real mysteries going on with genetic manipulation amongst the human population, speculations as to what these people are doing with the hybrids. Are they taking them to another planet, to some off-world population? Or Perhaps there's galactic terraformers whose mission, for whatever reason, is to terraform various planets and see